So let me start that. And because we are recording, we'll keep everybody on mute during this presentation. There will not be a questions and answers section for today's webinar, as we're trying to keep things under 30 minutes to respect everybody's time. I know everybody is busy, especially this time of year, trying to get 1099s and W2's and year end, and January is always a crazy month for folks. So we'll just get moving quite along. So I'm going to mute everyone and let's jump in. Okay, so introductions. This is the last of our year-end webinar series. So if you haven't been to any other ones, I'm Misty Palick. I'm a seasoned and certified Sage 100 contractor implementation specialist. That's a big old long sentence, isn't it? So I've used Sage 100 Contractor in industry for 11 years, and I've also been helping clients just like you guys for the past 6 years. So today's learning objectives are ways to scrub your employee records so W2s are easy. Do you have to pay Atrix to process your W2s, or can you just print your own W2s? How much does Atrix charge for processing W2s? Can you email the W2s to employees instead of mailing them? Which archive should you prepare the W2s from? And I see we have a question, just so you know. Alan, we will reach out to you, and yes, you can still have those videos. They're actually just up on the YouTube channel, so we'll make sure that you get a copy of all of them. So that's kind of today's agenda, and again, we'll show you guys contact information and the next steps if you guys are having any problems. I also threw in a couple bonuses for today because W2s are hard, right? Payroll's hard, so I threw in a couple bonus things that we'll get to also. So let's just talk about what are W2s. Everybody knows what W2s are. I mean, if you've worked in any kind of industry whatsoever, you've gotten a W2 at the end of the year that states all of your taxes and stuff. So I'd like to preempt this with, first, let me say a disclaimer. I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax advisor of any kind. The information I'm providing simply came from my 24 years of experience as an accountant and with the help of good old Google. So you should always check with your tax preparer to make sure that what is needed for your company specifically, and basically don't try this at home, kids. First off, a W2. So I looked up the definition, found that, maybe you'd find it interesting what the IRS calls or defines a W2 as. So Form W2 is an IRS tax form used by the United States to report wages paid to an employee and the taxes withheld from each employee. Employers must complete a Form W2 for each employee to whom they pay a salary wage to, or any other compensation as part of the employment relationship. So this is, this is one of my little bonus things that I threw in here, because I've been through a lot of situations over my career where the employer is like, are they employee or are they an independent contractor? Because in reality, when you look at an independent contractor, it's very tempting to go that route, because you don't have to pay taxes on them. You don't have to, pay benefits or anything like that. You're just paying them as an independent contractor. But there are some very gray areas when you're deciding are they an employee or are they an independent contractor? So I found this great little chart. And how I've always described it to, owners have come to me and they're like, well, are they an employee or are they an independent contractor? And the first question I ask them, are you controlling how they do their work, or are you just kind of letting them do whatever they want as long as they get to the end result? Because to me, that has been the biggest defining thing. Are they an employee? Are they an independent contractor, right? So if you're controlling what they're doing and how they're doing it, they are definitely an employee, not an independent contractor. So, you might think about that. There's definitely some advantages and disadvantages, but I do know that if you are kind of caught having an independent contractor when they really should have been an employee, there are some really steep fines and penalties against that. And even somebody anonymously could turn you in for that to the IRS. So just keep that in mind, that you walk a very fine line, a very tight rope when you're talking about, are they an employee or are they an independent contractor? So you can see this grid. It just has some really nice defining 4 different things, that it talks about. Does the prime contractor provide equipment, tools, or training to the worker, or the worker has everything they need? That you don't you maybe work it into their hourly rate for their equipment that you're using for your company, those kinds of things. So just keep this in mind. This is just a little bonus add-in. There are some big implications if you're caught having an independent contractor and they were meant to be an employee. So just be cautious, just kind of some words of advice that I thought were relevant in this case. And let's talk about where to find what's needed. So in the last couple seminars, we have certainly, or webinars, we've talked about where to find the checklist. And we did hear back, Dion gave me some feedback that he heard from one of you all, so thank you for sending that in to us, but they asked Sage when they were going to update the year-end checklist. And Sage kind of said, well, basically when we get around to it. So the Sage checklist does work. It is helpful. Let's see if I can pull Sage down here. So when you are looking at Sage, where do you find the checklist? If you go to Home and Resources, Product Documents, there is a year-end guide. So this really has to do with closing out your books for the year, archiving your company data, but it has a nice checklist. But what we were talking about is, so this is January 2020, hasn't been updated yet. Obviously, it's January 2021. So Sage's response is, well, when we get around to it, we will update this. But not much has changed. In the process of archiving your company, not much has changed. So let's get back to our regular scheduled program here real quick. Okay, so where do you find what's needed? So that's where you find the checklist. And when you click on that under Home and Resources, Product Documentation, Year-End Guide, it actually opens a website where Sage maintains that checklist for you. But that has to really do with closing out for the year, archiving your company data and your payroll data. So when you're ready to actually file your taxes or your W-2s, then you would go to 541 federal tax forms, and this has Atrix baked right in. So I'm sure some of you have experienced this. Maybe you're a newcomer and you haven't, but this is where you access all of your forms. There's a federal forms, there's a state forms, and I believe there's like ACA forms. So you would say, okay, I'm going to do my 2020 W-2, W-3. I would choose my year, and I would say run report. Now, something to keep in mind when you're in here, if you do your W-2s, it's not like a time test. It's not where it's going to, oh my gosh, I have to hit submit before I can get out of this Atrix thing. It's not like that at all. You can come back to it as many times as you need to. In fact, that happens a lot because companies need to, go investigate something. Do they need to add the owner's health insurance? What box does that go in? They talk to their CPA. The CPA says, put it in this box. And then they go back to the W-2 that they started previously. They add in that owner's health insurance, and everything is working fine from there. So just keep that in mind, that once you start the W-2 process, you don't have to finish it in one day or one time period. You can always come back to it and finish it later. But this is where all of your reports, all of your tax filings for federal comes from, your 941. So probably most of you are familiar with this Atrix filing. Another question that comes up pretty often is, are you tying out your payroll? So this is my other bonus item to y'all. I have a pretty developed spreadsheet that a CPA helped me with years ago when I was in industry, and it really just helps you tie out your payroll per quarter. And what does that mean? When you're operating in Sage and you're doing your payroll, and you've got all your payroll calculations set up and you're moving along, you should always be reconciling that outside of the system, just so it's a really good accounting practice to make sure that the payroll calculations are calculating accurately and that you haven't missed something, that maybe you have a auto allowance that was pre-tax and it was supposed to be post-tax. So you have your payroll calculations set up wrong. How would you know that if you were not going back and tying things out? So it's really important to tie out your payroll on a quarterly basis, just so you can make sure that everything flows right to the W-2. So I will have Dion, it's just an Excel spreadsheet. It has the different tabs for Social Security, and it even has use this report to come up with these wages. So I will have Dion send that out to everybody too, just as a bonus. You guys can use it as you see fit. Again, I'm not a CPA. It's just a nice little checklist that I've developed over the year and a tie out sheet. So, but you really should be making sure that you're scrubbing your data constantly. And that doesn't just include vendors, like we've talked about in the past, but making sure that your employees are up to date, making sure that their raises are up to date, making sure that if an employee leaves, you're adding a termination date. Like all of these things are important as you're moving through your database. It's not just, it's going to happen magically and I hope for the best. Right? Like you're constantly scrubbing your information inside of Sage, and that applies to everything inside of there. So when I talk about scrubbing up employees, you really make sure, again, that their status is accurate, that they haven't moved, that you have the right mailing address for them. If you are planning on emailing your W2's, you've got to make sure that you have the right email address for them. These are all things that, happen throughout the year that you should be making sure that your employee records are scrubbed constantly. That is very important. So another thing that comes up, and I've been helping a lot of customers with lately, is archiving payroll. And, Sage changed this a couple years ago where you can still enter payroll in the new year before you archive your payroll. But what I discovered, and I just discovered this with a client of mine, is they had done January 15th's payroll. They hadn't posted it or anything, but they had prepared it inside of Sage. They had cut checks. They just hadn't posted it. What happened when we archived their 2020, it actually didn't bring over the 2021 payroll that they had entered. So they had to re-enter that in the current year because that data took it over to the archive. So keep in mind that you need to archive your payroll before you post any new payroll or even process any new payroll in the new year. So you're going to run into problems if you try to do it later. Just a thought. So when you archive that, obviously, unless you're a really awesome and person and an accountant, and you've got all your ducks in a row and everything is closed out and you've done everything you can that you could process W2's right away before you archive, that is a possibility, but most people don't have it together that much to be able to do that. So they end up doing their W2's out of the archived payroll company. So, we get a lot of questions like, well, I went in to process my W2's in the current year and all my data is gone. Well, you need to be processing your W2's out of the archive that you created in the payroll module. So that is a very important thing, that you process your W2's out of the archive. That's, all I want to say about that. And we've talked about archives before, so you should know where those archives are stored, how you have access to them, all of that information. This is sort of a no-brainer because most of us have been in industry a long time, and we know that the deadlines for the W2's is January 31st. No employee has ever said to me, I wouldn't appreciate getting my W2 earlier than January 31st. But most companies can't do it that early because they just, they don't have, Alan sent me a message. So they don't have that capability of getting their ducks in a row fast enough to, get it early. But the deadline is January 31st. That's kind of a no-brainer. Also with the W3, so that's the form that you send to the Social Security Administration, is also due by January 31st. So they don't give you any leniency of like, oh, your W2's are due by January 31st, but then maybe your, W3 isn't due by February 15th or something. They are the same thing. Alan wanted to know if I will cover how to add COVID pay to Atrix for box 14. What I will say about that is you can always override those boxes in your W2 processing. So once you get into Atrix and it pulls all the data from the information that you've entered over the year. So you're processing payroll through there. You got all your payroll calculations, and you have those payroll calculations assigned to a box on the W2, so it knows where to put that. So the COVID pay, I just had a company contact me about this, and you really do need to talk to your CPA about this, but you could overwrite that in the W2 screen if you didn't have the payroll calculation, like maybe you didn't know. So you could take it out of their gross wages, say, for example, and adjust their gross wages on the W2, because all the gross wages are in there, but you want to move some of those gross wages to COVID wages, and then you figure out, okay, the COVID wages go to box 14. You can totally change those columns and overwrite the amounts inside the W2 format. So, don't be concerned of like, well, it's just going to take my data and print it in a W2. You have full rights to change that information as you need to. I always had the problem of something to do with like the 401k calculation would always dump to a different box. And I never could figure out why it did that, but it dumped to a different box. So I would always have to manually move that when I was processing the W2s. So again, I think you should check with your tax accountant and make sure that you have the payroll calculation set up appropriately for that. And but if you just need to move gross wages into a different box, you can do that at the W2 processing time, because it really just comes up with a great big spreadsheet almost where you fill out the pertinent information, if anything is missing or needs to be changed. So you have full control over how that is happening. But good question, Alan. Thank you. So I mean that's really a no-brainer of when do you prepare W2s? Everybody kind of knows that. So let's talk a minute about Atrix. I've used Atrix in many different programs. Actually, it's baked into Sage 50 and a couple other programs too. I really like Atrix. I think they're a really good service. They really know their stuff. They're not going to be like QuickBooks Online where they analyze, they do your taxes for you. That's not what Atrix is. Atrix is really a processing facility. So what they will do is they will process your W-2s. They'll, make your payments for you through EFTPS if you want them to. They will make your state income tax payments for you if you want them to. So they're really just a filing and payment processing. They're not necessarily create your tax forms for you. They rely on Sage for that, but they have that kind of baked into the system. So you can be as involved with Atrix as you want to. But in my personal opinion, you don't have to sign up for the whole year. Like say throughout the year, you are processing your tax, your 941, your state tax. Here in Iowa, we actually can't use Atrix form. We have to do their form online. So they don't even let us use Atrix's form. But you can choose to just print your 941s, mail them in. Somebody told me the other day that the IRS is going to stop accepting handwritten or printed documents, that they're going to make you do everything in the EFTPS somehow. But who knows when that's coming. So the idea is Atrix can file these things for you, but you don't have to sign up for the whole year. You can just sign up for bits and pieces. So it's kind of a la carte, right? So for W-2s, to me, $1.99 per employee for mailing out the W-2, getting a copy of the W-2 to the employee online. So they'll get a link and say, here, check out your W-2. Which is very secure. It has a password and all that good stuff. Files your W-3 with the SSA, all of that information. And then state W-2s are filed also. So for $1.99 a person, I mean, how can you go wrong? Why would you not choose to do that? In my opinion, I don't ever want to lick an envelope as long as I live again. And sure, there's glue sticks, but why would you even waste the time to buy the form, print it, hope that the printer lines up appropriately? Why would you go through that hassle for $1.99? I feel like that's not it's a total return on investment. So I would totally use Atrix in my personal opinion. Now, some people really like that process. They like to be able to stuff the envelope and mail it to the employee so that they know it's done. But Atrix has been doing this a long, long time. And they have their stuff together. One thing I was going to pull up here is the Atrix pricing page, because you can, hopefully everybody can see that's kind of small. You can do the online W-2 e-file service so that they don't actually get a paper W-2. They just get a link saying, here, check it out. And that's 99 cents per person. I mean, gosh, you just can't even beat that deal. That's a heck of a deal, I think. And then you have, if you want them just to file your W-3s, that's fine. It's 99 cents per employee. And then W-2 e-file service. So you can do that as well. That's only 49 cents per employee. So I feel like for the money, it's a heck of a deal and you should totally do it. Take advantage of it. And I've done it for many, many years. It works really well. And then you can always reprint your W-2s from Sage, because really what it's doing is it's doing your taxes over here in Sage and completing the W-2 form and everything. And then you're just uploading it to Atrix. You're connecting to Atrix, and it knows to do everything that you're needing to do, I guess. So it packages it up, sends it to Atrix, then they can take it from there and process it all the way down the line. Something else to mention, though, when you go into Atrix inside of Sage, there's like an automatic update. At least I get that automatic update every time. Like it says, you need to update your tax forms, blah, blah, blah. So I recently had a client who could not process 1099s. And that was because they don't process payroll out of Sage. So they didn't do the tax update after they archive, then you do the tax update. They didn't do that because they don't process payroll out of there. They couldn't process their 1099s. Like it told them, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't do this. And I couldn't update the forms. So now tomorrow we're going to be running a Sage upgrade so that they can actually process their 1099s this coming week. So just something to keep in mind, that those updates are important, and they do actually, even if you don't process payroll out of here, they do actually affect other areas. So you'll always want to keep your database upgraded and put together. And again, you can choose whether you're just printing these out of Sage 100 Contractor and doing them yourself. It still uses Atrix in the background, no matter which way you go. That's its platform for processing taxes. So you have Atrix in the background. You just choose, do you want to e-file it or do you want to just print it? Some companies go both ways. Some companies just do their 941s out of there themselves, and they just print them and mail them and go about their business. And then they just do the W-2s in here, because for $1.99, you just can't beat it. So you get to choose, what services you're going to use in Atrix. But no matter what you're doing for the taxes, if you're processing them through Sage 100 Contractor, you're already using Atrix. It is natively baked in. So just keep that in mind, that's kind of what Atrix is. It's a good value. I think it's very important to use. And then really, I know that these webinars are short, sweet. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I'm going to say thank you for spending all of your time with me. It has been such a pleasure. Dion will send out the YouTube link when we have all of the webinars uploaded, meeting today's. I have to convert today's recording, and then we'll upload it to the YouTube channel, and he'll send out a link for that. And then he'll also send out my handy dandy payroll tie-out template, just so you guys can play around with that. And it's just an Excel spreadsheet, just kind of a little bonus that some people might find useful. If you don't, then just toss it in the circular bin, right? So it's totally up to you. I hope these webinars have been helpful to you. I hope you got some tips and tricks at least, and we look forward to doing more in the future. So happy New Year, everybody, and take care.